one of many puddles. Could
All right. It's been quite a journey that any of you could have made. Today has been a journey that's a culmination of my journey getting this done. Like I said earlier in the morning, I'm an everyday kind of person. Like my podcast says, Guy Next Door Speaks. Could be anybody, guy, gal, young, old. That once you start getting to some truth, some information that resonates with truth, and you can see it, everyday life and your experiences, and you start figuring out that things aren't the way they're supposed to be, and that maybe you can be part of something to change it. And I know a lot of people who know me with the movies and all that and the quotes. I'm always, pulling from movies and stuff because life imitates art and art imitates life. And just like the current movie in theaters, Black Panther, if anyone hasn't seen it, the younger sister has a line that she says, "Do I have to keep teaching you that just because something works doesn't mean it can't be improved?" And that's kind of resonates with a lot of people just laying back and thinking the government will take care of it, religion, this or whatever, I don't have to do anything. But everything can be improved upon, and it does take a little bit of effort on each of our parts. And this is a culmination of my effort to plant seeds. I don't have all the answers. All of us here don't have all the answers, but we have pieces of the puzzle. And we're trying to plant seeds. So some of you will do a podcast, some of you will hold a conference, some of you will start touring and speaking, so that's what this is all about, really, is waking up the rest of us to keep growing, because 10 years ago I did not expect to be doing something like this, seriously. So, and now to bring it up to tonight, one of the main reasons is because of the man standing here to my left. A lot of researchers have put out work, and we learn from them and keep growing and fine, and it just keeps bouncing around our heads. Once in a while, it takes somebody to kind of, not curse you out, but kind of just speak very aggressively, like, "What the hell are you doing?" Like, "What the hell are you doing with this? It's not about you. Do something with it." And that's what I always say, kick in my butt, to do this. So anyway, that's what brought us here. But before I introduce them, real quick, the pub on campus, they, I guess, got a good vibe from the people that were going there. And they close at 9, but because of the event and everything, they're going to stay open later. So anyone and everyone is invited to go to the pub. A few people know where it is. They have food and drinks and whatever. So you're all welcome to head there after this shuts down. All right. Okay, so now I think this is okay. Pretty much, yeah. All the information is on the flyers, the website. There will be videos of this coming soon. I don't want to say when. It might be a month or two, free or pay-per-view. But stay checking the website for more details. But so I think that's pretty much it. Now, a lot of people had questions. Mark was on my preview episode and brought something up that surprised me and probably a whole bunch of you guys, that after so many years of work, the effort really isn't there on the receiving audience for support for this man. So he put out there that this might be his last presentation, his last time speaking in public. So you might be here to witness history, or, well, conspiracy history in American, truth movement history in American, because the media doesn't give a shit about him. But anyway, so we'll see what he has to say. So right now, I'll just go ahead and introduce Mark Passio, a friend and someone who woke me up. And so here he is, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. That's really wonderful. I'm going to do a few things before I get started with my actual presentation and the future. And I just want to let everybody know that a lot of offers were received on my part. It took a lot of asking. I was asking for assistance in what I've been planning to do for about a year and a half, and I guess I didn't ask forcefully enough, and it kind of, you know, a lot of tension got pent up in me, and it all came out on the podcast that I did with Ivan. I kind of really sort of lost on that podcast, and that spurred a lot of people to get in touch with me. Not all of them had the skill sets I was asking for. Not all of them were local. I've weeded through the responses, and I believe that I am going to have the help that I require. So I'm going to say that I'm going to optimistically but cautiously move forward with my work, and I'm going to start interviewing a few people who have responded, and it looks like they have the skill sets that are going to be required. So. You know, I just want to say there's so many people who have helped me over the years. You know, with what on earth is happening specifically, I've had very limited help. Certainly ancillary help, but never really actual good technical help, which is what I've asked for this time. And it was technical help that is going to be required to be done on site. And that's what created the issue, because Philadelphia is it's a tough city to spread this kind of information. It's very, very totalitarian-leaning political ideas within that city, believe it or not. And you know, it's a horrible thing to have to see the city go in that direction, but that seems to be the direction it's certainly heading. So that's what kind of caused a lot of the tension, because a lot of it was falling on deaf ears locally. But finally, I think I'm going to have the assistance that I require to proceed forward. And then the next thing I want to announce today is that I'm going to be part of what I was asking for technical help on was I want to start a new network in the style of some, you know, truth networks that you'll see out there online. And it's going to be called One Great Work Network. And this is something that I'm going to begin as a Facebook group, okay, an open Facebook group. And I'm going to start promoting the work of other people that I find very valuable to the truth-seeking community, and it's going to highlight the work of people who are really putting forward efforts that I find really valuable and effective in the communication of natural law principles. So that's where it's going to start, but that's only going to be the beginning of it. It's going to eventually be a full website with a lot of contributors. So it's going to be like a multimedia website where people that I accept onto the network as a contributor will be able to contribute in whatever way that they want through whatever type of media that they want. So, you know, for example, if Benny wants to come on the network and feature his presentation art in the way that he does it, he could come on the network and do that. If Ivan wants to come on and bring Guy Next Door Speaks podcast onto the One Great Network, I would invite him on to do that, and that would be his format. If there's artists that want to bring their work to the table, or musicians, or people who blog, or people who YouTube or DTube, or any media format, it's going to be a multimedia format with a lot of contributors that are focused on really improving the human condition. So that's my announcement today about the One Great Work Network. And that's one of the things that I needed some technical help with, because, you know, I know a lot about technology, but I don't know it all, you know, by any stretch of the imagination. I need help with things. There are things I do not know how to do. And the other people, they specialize in that. So they're going to bring their talent to the table in that regard and help me get that network up off the ground. So that's the second part of what I wanted to announce here today. And now finally, before I get started with the presentation, I have a very special announcement to make. I'm going to begin on a yearly basis giving an achievement award. And this is going to be called the One Great Work Achievement Award. And the recipient of the award on a yearly basis is going to be the individual that I feel is doing the best and most proliferous work in helping to communicate the ideas of natural law to the widest body of people possible, and who does that very effectively. And so today, at this event, at Truth, Mind, Reality, and before I even convey this award today, I want to say thank you so much to Ivan Oyola, and thank you so much to the organizational team. The whole organizational team was phenomenal and did a tremendous job in organizing this event, and this thing went off without a hitch. This is the way it should be done. This is done the right way. So thank you, Ivan, and the organizational staff. So without further ado, I want to introduce the first recipient of the One Great Work Achievement Award. I'm going to show you guys the award. I know the flat earthers are going to have a terrible problem with this. Okay, so the symbolism behind the award represents human consciousness, the three initiates, so to speak, of thought, emotion, and action that hold up the world. That's the symbolism behind this award. And there's the seal of the One Great Work on the base of the award. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce that the recipient of the 2018 One Great Work Award is Mr. Bill Church.
Thank you, brother. Thank you very much. I'm honored.
So, Bill, why don't you say a few words? Everybody should know Bill's work about the Free Your Mind podcast. I mean, he put out over 100 podcasts with phenomenal information. He does tons of work in his community, tons of great work with animals. And he has a brilliant communication skill set, and he is really doing the great work by putting this information out there. So, Bill, come on and say a few words to people.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. This is a huge honor, and I mean, I just encourage everybody else to take action. You know, we can make a difference in this world. It just takes one. Be the change that you seek. You know, what it's all about. Truth, love, and freedom. That's why we're here. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Church. Okay, so let's get down to business. I want to thank everybody for being here first and foremost. You guys are phenomenal. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being part of this great event, and thank you for the work that you do on an individual basis to bring the truth forward. My presentation here today is entitled Duress, Dissidence, and Deadly Force. And I just want to take a moment to ask people to put themselves in a state of mind to really be prepared to hear some heavy information in this presentation. It's going to be tough for some people to hear some of the things I'm going to say today. So this is not done lightly. This is should be received with a somber state of mind and a sobering state of mind. And there are certain things I'm going to talk about that some people don't even want to envision. However, we have to consider them and hold them in our psychological makeup as potentialities. They're potentialities I don't want to see manifest in the world, never have. But we have to be prepared that they may manifest. So with that being said, let's jump into the topic. I dedicate this presentation in its entirety to the memory of Samuel Adams. Samuel Adams, perhaps more than anybody else, is the person that I historically, personally identify with, because perhaps single-handedly, this man began the American Revolution. He was probably the most influential soul of that time period as far as bringing people to action. He exercised the call to action more than anyone else. He was called by the British the chief conspirator. As a matter of fact, the American Revolution was referred to by some people in England and some of the Tories in America as the Adams Conspiracy. John Adams, when he traveled to Europe, was often asked, especially when he went to France, "Are you the famous Adams?" And he had to respond, "No, I'm not. That's Samuel Adams." So Samuel Adams said, "The truth is, all might be free if they valued freedom and defended it as they ought." Freedom has to be valued and defended. And that is why we're in the situation that we are in as a people, because truth isn't valued and defended enough. So this presentation is not for very young people, not for children, and it's certainly not for the easily offended. So if you have that sensibility about you, now's the time to leave. I think no one here will be easily offended. I think, we're all in the room because we recognize the information that I'm about to speak here today is vitally important to understand. So this is the caveat I always give. It's certainly not for the people in this room, but it may certainly be for the people who listen online or on YouTube or on my website or wherever this presentation is going to reach their eyes and ears. My presentation style can be very intense. It can be harsh. It can even be combative. I don't sugarcoat my words or delivery. Some people are likely to become upset or angered at what I'm going to say during this presentation, and I say, go right ahead and get as offended as you like. Okay? That will never make what I'm about to say untrue, because truth by its very nature is belligerent. It wages war against deception and mind control. I don't present this information to be liked. Believe me, if I wanted to present information to be liked, I'd be blowing smoke up people's rear end and telling them everything was fine and they're doing just fine and everything's going to be okay. I tell people very uncomfortable realities, and a lot of people don't like that. So, I may be popular among some of the people in this room, but that's not necessarily the case when it comes to the wider body of humanity, for sure. I speak publicly because I recognize that in the crisis that we're in right now, I have a moral obligation to communicate what I know to be taking place in our world to other people, to help them to understand it as well, so they can take action and do something about it. This is a call to action, ladies and gentlemen. And the bad news is this is still the mindset of the vast majority of humanity. And that's the best image that I could find to sum up what I think of the human mindset in the aggregate. It certainly doesn't apply to the people in this room, as I've said, but this is where Earth is at. The people of Earth are right there, firmly right there, okay? And they need to extricate themselves from that position. And otherwise, we're going to be coming down to this very serious consequences I'm going to be talking about. Manly P. Hall said that it is not the wrath of the Almighty, but the stupidity of man that is causing all the trouble. And if people are not familiar with this man's work, I mean, you need to become so, because he was absolutely a brilliant philosopher, an occultist, a de-occultist, as far as I'm concerned. And he has some of the best work that I've ever taken in that really helped to open up my mind and wake me up. This is the human condition, ladies and gentlemen. The human condition, whether anyone has recognized it or not, or accepted it or not, is slavery. And see, I'm not going to sugarcoat words. Never have, never will. I'm going to come out and say it just as it is in plain language, regardless of who likes it or not. The whole idea of true spirituality The whole goal of true spirituality is the ending of the human condition called slavery. It's never been okay. It's not okay now. It never will be okay. It's completely immoral, and the people who continue to perform the actions that hold the human condition in this state or support and condone those actions are immoral people. And we are the people who need to reach out to those people that can be helped and change their mindset. That's what the great work is. People will say, well, there's many paths to freedom and spirituality. But I'll take umbrage with that statement. There are many paths that can get you to an understanding of what the solution is, but there's only one real, true solution. And this can sound dogmatic to people. It can even sound religious to people. And I try to explain to people in all my work, I'm not dogmatic, I'm not religious. To say something to the effect of, do you believe in natural law or do you think it's some type of religious dogma, is as ridiculous as asking someone if they believe, if I hold an object up and then let it go, will it fall downward? There is no dogma or religious belief required for that. It's law in the universe. Well, behavior is also bound by law. This is the problem with the human ego, though. The human ego refuses to accept that behavior is bound by law. And we want to think we can do anything we want as long as we don't get caught. The only solution is the understanding of natural law and how we are inextricably forever bound by it. We have free will to choose our behavior, but we do not have free will to be insulated from the consequences of our choices in free will. Natural law is the most occulted information that needs to be understood by humanity, and there is very little progress in propagating a worldwide understanding of natural law to the body of humanity. That's what our work is, folks. That's what the work of the people in this room and the people who do understand this, listening out there on the internet, is. We have to become teachers of this information. I naively thought in my early days of doing this that there would be at least 1 million to 10 million teachers of natural law in the world by this point after doing this for a decade. And I can count them on 2 hands. The good ones, the ones who are doing it effectively. You know, it's not, our efforts are not enough. That's the thing that I want to convey to the people in this room and listening who do understand my work. The effort has to be advanced and stepped up. We need to become teachers of this information to everyone within earshot of our voices, or humanity is going to go down the path I'm going to talk about, which is going to be very, very, very ugly. Natural law is a set of universal, inherent, objective, non-man-made, eternal, and immutable conditions which govern the consequences of behaviors of beings with the capacity for understanding the difference between harmful and non-harmful behavior. That means it applies to intelligent beings who have a developed brain and nervous system like we do, okay? It doesn't apply to lesser beings, to the animal kingdom. They're not going to sit there and reason. We have the capacity for reason. They're instinctual creatures. They have emotions as well. But we have higher thought functions. That's why natural law applies to us. The behavioral laws of creation apply to humans and more advanced beings, because we have the capacity for understanding morality. A worldwide common sense understanding of true objective morality and the laws that govern behavioral consequence is the only true solution to the current human condition of slavery. For as long as humanity remains ignorant of the occulted knowledge of natural law, it will remain enslaved. And that is by law, by universal cosmic law. By no laws of man will remain enslaved. It will be enslaved by the laws of creation. For those who are not familiar with my work regarding natural law, I absolutely encourage everyone to watch my 3-part video series called Natural Law, the Real Law of Attraction and How to Apply It in Your Life. That's for free on my website in the videos section, or you can get a hard copy here, or you can get a hard copy on my gifts area of my website. What natural law is all about is the objective difference between right behavior and wrong behavior. I always tell people that, we use the same word to communicate the idea of correct and moral. We use the word right to communicate those concepts. Correct means based in truth, and moral means that it is in harmony with natural law principles, because when you take a right action, the result of that action does not result in harm to other beings, to other sentient beings. Conversely, wrong behavior is both incorrect and immoral. Incorrect meaning it is not based in truth, and immoral meaning it is in opposition to natural law, because when we take wrong behaviors, someone is harmed as a result of that behavior, of that behavioral choice. The problem is, folks, most people still in the year 2018, sad as though it may be to say, cannot properly define a right. They cannot give you the definition of what a right behavior is. And that's why we're losing our rights. Because they do not understand that a right is an action that does not cause harm to another sentient being. And that is the definition, and it is as simple as that. I've rewatched the movie K-Pax recently. And it's about an alien being that comes to the earth and interacts with, the primitive human beings that can't understand his mindset. And when he's asked if his planet has a government, he says, we have no need for a government. And he's like, well, how do your people know right from wrong? And his answer is, every being in the universe knows the difference between right and wrong. That's the real answer to that question. This should be common sense knowledge, but we're so backwards as a species that I need a 9-hour presentation to explain to brainwashed people what the difference between right and wrong behavior is. I've said in past presentations, sometimes I sit up at night and laugh at the ridiculousness of what I do. Really. I laugh at how ridiculous having to present basic information like this is. And yet the majority of human beings, it's falling on deaf ears. The following actions are examples of the initiation of aggression against others, which is what all wrongdoings are. These actions are violations against natural rights and therefore constitute violence. Murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, and coercion. And you could think all you want about any wrongdoing that can possibly be committed. I've challenged many, many people to do this, and you will recognize every single wrongdoing that can be committed against another human being is a form of theft. There is only one wrong, theft, in one form or another, and there is only one law in the universe. Don't steal. That's it. Every wrongdoing comes down to an act of theft. Provably. Murder is the taking without just cause of the life of another, which does not belong to you. Assault is the taking without just cause of another being's physical well-being, which does not belong to you. Rape is the taking of another's free will sexual consent, which does not belong to you. Theft is the taking of property, physical property, which does not belong to you. Trespass is the taking of the security of another person in their domain, in their dwelling place, which does not belong to you to take. Coercion is the taking of another being's free will, which does not belong to you to take. Every wrongdoing is a form of theft. There's no wrongdoing anyone can think of that is not a form of theft. Natural law versus man's law. Natural law is based upon principles and truth which are inherent to creation. Man's law is based upon dogmatic belief systems which are the constructs of a diseased mind. Natural law is only ever harmonized with due to knowledge and understanding, or not harmonized with due to ignorance. Man's law, on the other hand, is only complied with due to fear of punishment. Natural law is universal. It exists and applies anywhere in the universe, regardless of location. Man's law differs with location based upon the whim of the legislators who are making up these decrees and commands. And that is a form of moral relativism, the idea that we can decide what right and wrong are, that they are not objective and inherent to creation because they are based upon actions. Natural law is eternal and immutable. That means it exists and applies for as long as the universe exists, and it cannot ever be changed by any action that any being within the universe can do. Man's law, on the other hand, changes with time based upon the whim of legislators, which is also moral relativism. If a man-made law is in harmony with natural law, it follows logically that it is redundant, since it is stating a truth that is inherent, pre-existing, eternal, and self-evident, or it should be self-evident. Therefore, man's law is both irrelevant and unnecessary. If a man-made law is in opposition to natural law, it follows logically that it is both false, meaning it is incorrect, and it is immoral, meaning it is harmful. It results in harm to other beings. Or in other words, it's wrong. Therefore, man's law that is in opposition to natural law can never be legitimately binding upon anyone. Therefore, I say throw all of man's law out. We don't need it. We only need to understand and bring our behavior into compliance with natural law. That's it. And then we would experience a society based in freedom. Because as we engage in moral behavior, a society in the aggregate becomes more free. And as we engage in immoral behavior, a society in the aggregate becomes more enslaved. That is the natural law of freedom. There is a law that governs the freedom of a whole society. As morality increases, freedom increases. As morality declines, freedom declines. There's only one true divide in all of humanity, only one thing that really separates human beings into two groups. This is what I call the true dialectic or the true divide. There's only one divide that separates humanity into two distinct types of individuals. The criterion for this divide is whether or not an individual believes in the concept of authority and therefore believes that there is legitimacy to slavery. Because that is what authority is. That is what the belief in authority is. It is the belief in the legitimacy of slavery. The only difference between human beings is whether they are a statist or an anarchist. There is no other difference. And I don't mean like characteristics and personality. I'm talking about things that actually, truly separate us into two camps of beings. The statist says he has the brilliant idea that we give a small group of people the right to kidnap, imprison, harass, steal from, and kill people so that we can be protected from people who kidnap, harass, steal from, and kill people. Brilliant ideology. It's working out so well, don't you think? Our rights are protected, we're prosperous, we're free. It's just a flawless idea that's working out wonderfully. I have told this anecdote in the past. I was looking for a picture of an anarchist, and you're not going to see any pictures of people in the quote-unquote anarchist movement. I'm not going to single out anybody, least of all myself, to put a picture and say they're the quintessential anarchist. So I was going through images, and I found this meme with Jesus as the anarchist saying, I'm an anarchist, but most of my followers are statists. And nothing could be more true. The fake-ass Christian religionists that all believe in the authority of government and have this, dissonance in their mind that somehow, God could be an authority bringing the laws of behavior and the universe upon people, and yet we can still have authority vested in man. This idea of serving two masters. A statist is an individual who erroneously believes that there is such a thing as authority vested in certain human beings, which magically gives them the right to rule over other people. This, quote, authority means that certain people who we call government, the masters, have the moral right, quote unquote, to issue commands to those whom they rule, and those under their, quote, jurisdiction, which literally means the law is what I say it is. Literally in its etymological roots. These people are their slaves who have a moral obligation to obey the arbitrary dictates, the laws set by their masters. And most simply put, when we really strip away all the euphemism, a statist is simply someone who believes in the legitimacy of slavery. And that makes them, by definition, immoral. Conversely, an anarchist is one who knows that there could never be legitimacy to authority or government because those terms are simply euphemisms for coercion, violence, and slavery, which are always immoral and therefore are always in opposition to natural law, the universal spiritual moral laws of creation. The problem is people don't understand the meaning of true anarchy. I'm not talking about, people who call themselves anarchists, folks. When I'm using the term anarchy here, I'm talking about true anarchy and true anarchists. And there's only one real kind of anarchist, and that is the anarchist that understands all authority, all government is slavery, and the only solution is moral behavior under natural law. That's what an anarchist really is. The word anarchy comes from the Greek prefix an, meaning without, the absence of, and the Greek noun archon, meaning master or ruler. Anarchy does not mean without rules. It does not mean chaos. It does not mean disorder. It does not mean, quote unquote, lawlessness when it comes to moral law. It literally means without rulers, without masters, and archon, without masters, meaning no masters, no slaves. And if you say the phrase no masters, no slaves to the average person, and you say word association game, tell me the first word that comes to your mind when I say no masters, no slaves, they'll say freedom. But I just gave you the etymological meaning of a word from its root language, and the word literally means without masters. And yet people think it means chaos and lawlessness and disorder instead of what it really means, freedom. That is what the word anarchy actually means by its very definition. So we have to understand the solution is living in a society, in a state of existence where we don't have a master class and a slave class, a ruling class and a ruled class. All of us are already ruled by natural law, and we need to simply bring our behaviors into alignment with those laws by thinking, feeling, and doing what is right. Yet this is the perpetual, continued human condition of slavery. And we have had this kind of slavery in this very country. Hard ball and chain, whip and murder, full physical enslavement of human beings right here in this country. Part of what this kind of forced labor was used to build a lot of the infrastructure of this country. We are not in the state right now where we have this kind of slavery taking place all around us, but we're going to move toward it again. We're going to move toward it again as a karmic consequence of what we allowed here, and a karmic consequence of, as an aggregate people, of allowing the soft form of slavery called government to continue. Because it is never going to stop its march toward total totalitarianism unless we morally straighten up and educate everyone regarding moral principles. And that slavery in any form is wrong, no matter how you euphemize it. So this is the continuing human condition, and the great work is to end that condition. That is what the great work is, and that's why so few people want any part of it, because it's not the lighthearted little party. It's the one great work. Just to tell people, not that it matters, because you know what? Too many people are focused on dollar signs and value being only in monetary units. But just to tell people, just so you have an idea of the kind of financial situation I have foregone to do this work. I actually sat one day and calculated the amount of money that all of the work that I've ever done in What on Earth is Happening by man hours and the type of work that it is. I calculated the going rates and the amount of man hours that I've done in What on Earth is Happening. You want to take a guess of how much money I would have made if I would have been paid to do the type of technological work that I've done with What on Earth is Happening? $330,000. Try again, sir. Try again. Way higher. Way higher. $3.5 million. I made $13,000 last year on What on Earth is Happening work. Yeah. No, I mean, seriously, like, no one should really clap about that, you know? Like I certainly probably should have made the former number instead of the latter one, okay? But what we do is we reward basketball players and football players and, you know, pop music artists, you know? That's what we reward and put up on a pedestal and reward financially, because that's what the people of this world find value in. People come up to me all the time, Mark, why aren't you doing way better? Why are you living like you're living? Why are you living so meagerly? You know, because that's how much people have valued this work in the world. And I don't do this for monetary value. I could care less. I'm going to continue to do this if it costs me money to do it, which it did initially in the initial years. You know? So that's not my motivating factor. My motivating factor is to end this condition. Too many people have this idea of, I have to be rewarded financially to do this. I liken it to somebody standing in a war ditch while the enemy is raining fire down upon them, and people are saying, here, take this weapon, fire back, and they're going, pay me first. It's that ridiculous. But it's just something that I wanted to say about what people find value in and what they don't find value in. And that's part of the problem. Slavery is a claim of ownership on your person, the product of your labor or your possessions in whole or in part. All natural rights are property rights. Understood properly, all rights are property rights. Because all wrongdoing is theft. It's the taking of some form of property. Understanding this is fundamental to understanding the condition of slavery. We all own ourselves and have the right to live freely and exercise our natural rights, provided actions we perform do not infringe upon another person's rights. Anyone who dares to try to stop people from living within these natural rights is making a direct claim of ownership upon that other being, which is the very definition of slavery. Those who do this or condone this are tyrants and should be treated as such. This is no light matter, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I told you, get into a somber, serious mindset about the topics I'm going to talk about and discuss today, because this is extremely serious and should be taken as such. The people who are doing what they are doing have no right to do these coercive and immoral behaviors and conduct them upon the human population. And we have every right to end that state. And ladies and gentlemen, get as offended by this next statement and slide all you want, but here are the enforcers of slavery in the modern world. The police and the military are the enforcers of slavery. I don't care who you know that's in the police or military. I don't care who you like that's in the police or military. I don't care what kind of relationship you have with people that are in the police and military. I will look any member of the police and military in the eyes directly to their face and tell them that they are the enforcer of worldwide slavery, because that is the truth. They work for the interests of the ruling class and the dictates of the ruling class. Period. The end. And until these people walk away from their immoral jobs, humanity is going to remain enslaved, or it's going to take something that is going to be extremely negative and ugly for everyone to end the condition of slavery, which I don't want to see it come to. The great work is to get these people to quit their cult. That's what the great work is. It's to get people to quit these cults, because that's what they are cults They're satanic cults, and to get the people who condone these cults to stop condoning the behaviors of these cults. If you're not familiar with my work on order followers, which is what these people are, that's why they do what they do. They don't want to think for themselves. They don't want to reason right and wrong for themselves. They want to listen to what other people tell them to do and then just do it because that's a cop-out and an easy answer, and they think that that somehow absolves them of their personal responsibility and moral culpability. I put out this a few years back called The Cult of Ultimate Evil, Order Followers and the Destruction of the Sacred Feminine, which is the true heart-based care energy within all of us, which gets murdered in these cult members so that they can go out and perform the behaviors that they perform like the automaton robots that they are. So this is another critical video for people to take in and understand the concepts in it. The police and the military are the modern equivalent of house slaves of the Civil War era period. They are the people who are keeping the system of slavery in place. And they do this through duress, which is the first part of the 3 parts of this presentation: duress, dissidence, and deadly force. Part of the problem in the non-recognition of the human condition of slavery is most people do not understand what the condition of duress is and why it is so immoral to conduct upon anyone. I'm going to explain what duress is. And these enforcers of slavery are continuously conducting duress upon other beings. And they have no natural right to perform duress and keep other people in a state of duress. And the people who are under this state of duress have every right to end it by whatever means they choose to end it. They have the right. Now, see, I want to make it clear today, I'm not suggesting a direct course of action to anyone. I'm just trying to explain to you what your natural rights are to do. You might be perfectly within your natural law right to take a behavior and yet still die because you take that behavior. To do the right thing is not always the safe thing to do. I'm not talking about what's safe in this presentation. I'm talking about what's our right to do, naturally and inherently in creation. Is it a right or is it not a right? That's all I care about. I'm not talking about whether negative consequences will be rained down upon me by brainwashed cult members if I perform the behavior that I have the right to perform. I'm just trying to conceptually have you understand that the right to do a specific behavior to end duress exists in nature. So let's look at what duress is. Duress is a condition, a continuous condition of coercion, of the free will of a being or group of beings by another being or group of beings through threats of violence and or actual acts of violence if those being coerced do not comply with the decrees or commands they are given. That's what duress is. It's someone saying to you, you will comply to my decrees or commands, or I threaten you with violence if you don't comply. That's the condition of duress. When people are held in the condition of duress, they are unlawfully, and I mean unlawfully not by man's law, but by natural law, prevented from exercising their free will to engage in rights which they actually possess, and or they are coerced through threats of violence to perform behaviors against their free will. Meaning if they don't do something, violence will be conducted upon them. Or if they do something that the masters tell them they must not do, violence will be conducted upon them, even if that behavior is one of their rights. That is what duress is. That's what duress always has been. That's what duress always will be. And every single individual in this room, listening on video, and in the entire world is living in the condition of duress, whether they know it or not. I am under duress. You are all under duress. Every person here is living in a state of continuous duress. And there is no one on this planet that has the right to hold anyone in the condition of duress, and every person held under the condition of duress has the right to end that condition immediately upon its beginning, by whatever means necessary to end it. That is our natural law right, our birthright. So why do people make the distinction between people who put other people in duress as common thug criminals or mafia types, robbing people directly on the street, or demanding protection money to allow them to keep operating a business? They separate those people from the people who are saying, you can't exercise this right without my approval, or if we find you doing this particular behavior that we told you can't do, we're going to come and shoot you or strangle you or do other kinds of violence unto you. Yet our society somehow is so brainwashed we make this distinction. You know, we think that one group of people is not holding someone in duress, namely the police and the military and the government officials, and yet the common street thug or the common mafia enforcer is holding people in duress without right. Well, news flash, everyone, there's no difference between the states of duress in these images. Because if you believe certain people have rights that other people believe, you don't understand truth, you don't understand morality, and you don't understand natural law. Every one of these instances in this slide is a criminal act that the person has no right to perform as an individual. So what's the difference between a police officer and a strong-arm mafia enforcer? Nothing. There is no difference between them. They are both common criminals. They are both members of gangs, and I would have been that word to say they are both members of cults who do not question orders or think for themselves. They both initiate violence to enforce policy. Both have a code of secrecy, a lack of transparency, and both cite the institution's policies for the violence that they manifest in reality. They are ultimately responsible for their behaviors, yet they want to somehow abdicate themselves of that responsibility by saying, oh, the politicians ordered me to do it. The lawmakers ordered me to do it. It doesn't matter who tells you to do something that's wrong. If you did it, you're responsible for the harm. So, you know, we look at mafia crime, right? And this is big in where I come from. You know, South Philly's a mafia stronghold. Almost everybody I know knows somebody that's been involved at some point or another in mob syndicates, you know? So let me ask you a question. They're all identified with the gang, the mafia, the mob. Does that mean that the person who's the bag man running drugs or running number tickets or, you know, taking bets or something like that isn't identifying with the same gang as the person who actually conducts a hit? You could argue, well, one's exercising one level of violence that's very high, and yet the other is simply on the team that's condoning that violence. They may not be performing an act like the ones at the bottom, but nonetheless, they're condoning it because they're on the same team and they're still helping the people who are doing that. You know what that's called? It's called a complicit gang member. Or, I would word it, a complicit cult member. They're just as complicit. The lower level people involved who are supporting the institution that runs their behavior are just as complicit as the murderers in that institution. It's the same thing with any institution. You could look at normal, common street gangs. I mean, this is big on the West Coast with a lot of gangs. It's big in Chicago with gangs. New York, to an extent as well. Philadelphia gangs are a little bit to a lesser extent, but major U.S. cities have problems with gangs. Okay? Now, we will look at their actions and say, well, hey, what about the lower ranking gang member who is just out, selling a couple of bags of cocaine on the corner? Well, they're still identified and are a lower level member of a gang that's conducting violence. They're conducting this violence for territory. They're conducting this violence for the right to operate within the region that they're operating in. Hence why it's called a gang. They control territory that they operate in and try to keep anybody out from that territory. It doesn't matter what level of involvement they have. They're involved with a gang that is violent, and therefore they are complicit in the violence that is backed by this gang. Well, that's one thing. Yeah, exactly. The people who are actually doing organized crime, no one thinks they have a right to do this organized crime. Correct. No one would think, hey, the gang members have this right, the mafia has this right. You wouldn't think that, yet people believe government has these rights to conduct violence upon people. So again, you look at some of these behaviors that are conducted by the cult of ultimate evil, namely the segment of that cult called the police. Look at the kind of violence they conduct, throwing a paralyzed man out of a wheelchair because he didn't stand up upon command. Ripping a school child out of a desk violently, almost breaking their neck by turning their chair over backwards. Pepper spraying student protesters in the face with 2 million Scoville pepper spray. Kicking a handcuffed woman in the back of the head with a round kick. That's a big man right there, boy. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what that is, a fucking coward. That's exactly what that is. Let me tell you something, folks. These are the tame examples of police brutality in this country. Tame examples. Now, you look at the desk guy with the happy smile on his face. Oh, and notice the stormtrooper in front of him. He thinks that's one of the people he should be, modeling his behavior upon. Yeah. But what is that? What is that paper pusher in the cult of ultimate evil? He is a complicit gang member. That's what he is. Just like the bag man in the mob, just like the lower level gang member selling some cocaine on the corner. Doesn't matter what your level of complicity in the violence is. You're complicit in the violence. These people are destroyed at a soul level. They're husks. They are spiritually dead husks. People will say, oh, Mark, you're dehumanizing people. No, I'm trying to tell you how spiritually destroyed a human being can become. And you know what? We have to understand, not all of them are going to be able to be reached with words. Not all of them. We may be able to reach many. That's what our job is to do. I'm saying we have to step up the effort more to reach people with reason and words and morality, an understanding of morality. But there are some who are destroyed beyond the ability to reverse their course. They're dedicated to evil, whether they even understand that their behavior is evil or not, because that's what a cult does. It makes their membership completely identified with their position in the cult. And then they just say, I'm in this far, I'm all the way in. And no one's going to convince me that I was wrong. See, this is thankfully, thank all of creation that I was able to extricate myself from when I was involved in the cult that I was involved in, namely the dark occult, Satanism. Finally, I was able to be reached with language and reason and persuasion. I also had to practically ruin my life and almost die. That's how hard-headed I was. And then I think I was that hard-headed. There are people who make me look like a light case of the ego. a light case, you know? So I'm trying to explain to people, you have to understand what we're really up against spiritually, how deadened certain people are spiritually. It's going to take Herculean, monumental efforts to try to mentally and spiritually reform these people. That's what the great work is. I'm not saying this to make you depressed about it. We have to know what the task is. We have to know it definitively, honestly, and accurately, or we're not going to get this job done. Again, these are the modern so-called house slaves. Now, what the house slaves of the American Civil War era period were, tragically what they were, as violent and immoral and completely and utterly wrong as the practice of slavery was being performed in this country, you have to understand there were people who were taken from their native lands, and because they were given a little bit more privilege, they beat and whipped and kept the other slaves in line that were often family members, parts of their tribal groups, etc. You'll look in these images, there are slaves with their hands, threatening the other slaves who are non-compliant with the master's demands. They're willing to do this to their own people for a little bit extra food or a warmer blanket, or instead of to sleep, in the elements in a field, in a crop field, to sleep in a dog house in a crop field. Literally. You see some of them with guns, holding guns while the others are in chains. I mean, this is a special kind of psychopath. This is a special kind of immoral human being. Instead of trying to do something to end the condition for all of them, they took up the side of the master. And this is what the modern police forces are, and the modern militaries are. And in every country in the world, it doesn't matter, it's not just this country, everywhere on earth. That's what this cult of ultimate evil actually is. They are slaves themselves conducting slavery upon other slaves. And they don't even want to be free. There's a special place in hell for the house slave. There's a special place in hell. Whether you believe in hell or not, I'm talking about there is a special place of spiritual torment that is reserved in the hearts and minds of people who do jobs like that. The order follower always bears more moral culpability than the order giver, because their excuse is, I'm just following my orders, like the Nazis said at Nuremberg. Their excuse is, well, that's the law and I don't make it, I just enforce it. I'm just doing my job. They bear more moral responsibility than the person telling them to take the action. Because the order follower is the one who performs the behavior. And in taking that action, they actually bring the resultant harm into physical manifestation in the world. Order following is the pathway to every form of evil and chaos in our world. It should never be seen as a virtue by anyone who considers themselves a moral human being. Order followers have ultimately been personally responsible and morally culpable for every form of slavery and every single totalitarian regime that has ever existed upon the face of this planet. And get as offended about that as you like, those listening out in the internet world, but nothing will make that statement untrue. Nothing will make this one untrue either. If you did it, you are ultimately responsible, not whoever told you to do it. The excuse that I was ordered to do this immoral behavior by someone else is no excuse at all and should never be accepted as an excuse by anyone with a conscience. Now, I'm going to get into a section that some even here today may find difficult. Okay? Now, I'm going to refute the notion that is popularly held that people have the right to, quote unquote, believe whatever they want to believe. And I'm here to tell everybody here and everybody listening, wherever they're listening from, we do not have the right to believe everything we want to believe. There are beliefs that are not rights. Okay? There are beliefs that are not rights. Now, let me qualify this first by explaining the difference between a thought and a belief. Everyone can think anything they want, which means for a time you are holding something in your mind to consider it. This is a thought. I'm not suggesting thought police, okay? What I'm saying is, since we have the capacity to reason through our thoughts, when you come to a completely erroneous, immoral, and incorrect conclusion by using your thoughts, and then you harden and compress and harden those thoughts into a belief structure, that is when they cross the line between thought and belief system. I'm trying to explain to people that not every belief system is a right. Thoughts are rights that we all possess, but we do not have the right to, in perpetuity, continuously believe certain things, which are wrong and immoral. Contrary to popular disinformation and widely held but erroneous belief, as human beings, we do not possess the right to believe whatever we want to believe. We possess the right to believe whatever we want to believe, even if those beliefs are wildly out of touch with reality, only if those beliefs do not condone violence against or support the slavery of other beings. That's the kinds of beliefs we have. So I'll give an example. Do you have the right to believe that there are pink and purple striped unicorns wandering through the air at any given moment? Yeah, you have the right to believe that. You want to know why? That's not violent toward other people. That's why you can believe that nonsense. Okay? That's why I don't have a problem with most religious beliefs. I may think that they are nonsense myself, but as long as they are not condoning or supporting the commission of violence and slavery against other people, believe whatever the hell you want. Where I have a moral problem with it, rightly so, is when someone else believes I'm somebody's rightful slave, or anyone else is anyone's rightful slave. Now I have a big moral problem with that. That's not a right. No one has that right to even believe that in perpetuity, in a continued state of thought. We can consider the notion of slavery by thinking about it, but if we don't come to the correct moral conclusion that it is immoral, wrong, and should never be practiced and should be immediately ended, the belief that it's okay to perpetrate it is wrong. It's a wrongdoing, because you are actually condoning the actions that continue this immoral behavior. Would people in the southern colonies have had the right to continue to believe that the practice of owning black slaves in the South was a right? That wasn't one of their rights, even if they didn't own slaves themselves. How many people owned slaves in the Civil War era period? And when slaves escaped from the forced labor camps called plantations they were forced to work on, when they escaped, the person would have tried to capture them and bring them back into captivity, because they believed that this was a legitimate condition of owning other people. They had no right not only to do those behaviors, but to even believe in the legitimacy of the condition of slavery. No such right exists, and never has. Sorry, let me go back a slide. To believe government is legitimate is to believe that slavery is legitimate, and that is not a right. We can consider the notion of government through our thoughts, but when we erroneously come to the incorrect conclusion and harden that into a belief system, that becomes a violent belief. The people who believe that slavery is legitimate through government are not within their rights. They are not within their rights to continue to believe that slavery is legitimate for anyone. Unfortunately, in the modern world, people don't understand the distinction. They think there's some sort of a distinction. They don't understand that they're the same thing, government and slavery. Government is slavery. If stealing 100% of the product of someone else's labor is slavery, at what percentage does it become not slavery? This question was originally, I ask this question all the time, but this question was actually originally posed by Frederick Douglass, a slave who escaped his captivity in the South and eventually went to Europe because he was under such duress of being captured and brought back into slavery in the southern states when he moved to the northern states. That he had to actually go over the ocean to where at least black slavery wasn't practiced at the time. Although they're in the other kind of slavery called the belief in a king and queen, called royalty. You know? Slavery works better in the modern world because now people don't even know that they're slaves through mind control and mental conditioning and calling it a euphemized term called government and authority. Here's the bottom line when it comes to belief systems, folks. As difficult even as it may be for some people in this room even to get this concept, no one has the right to believe that people are property. In addition to that, no one has the right to believe that slavery is legitimate for anyone. And now, I'm going to take it a step further. Really pay attention to this one, because here's where people are really in wrong belief who are refusing to get this message and wake up. No one has the right to believe that slavery is legitimate for anyone, including themselves. This is a big thing you hear even in the freedom movement. Well, if other people want to be slaves, that's their right. No, it's not. No, it's not. No one has the right to believe that they are rightful slaves. Do you want to know why? That belief perpetuates the belief in the legitimacy of slavery, which is also not a right. You don't have a right to believe that you're the legitimate slave of another being. There is no such right in nature. Never has been. We have to abandon this erroneous notion that somehow government is legitimate and a ruling class and a slave class is legitimate through the idea of authority, this erroneous notion. And I think Samuel Adams, again, who is my heart and soul of a dissident, Samuel Adams, who rode on horseback from Boston to Philadelphia to speak at the Pennsylvania State House and urge for a physical rebellion against the tyranny of the crown. Without that man doing that, the American Revolution may have never happened. And I'll tell you, it's probably the closest thing to a divinely inspired holy act that has ever taken place on this planet. And the people who don't understand what happened in the American Revolution, I feel sorry for them for believing in revisionist history, which I'm going to talk about. Because we need to understand what exactly happened here in the Revolutionary War era period and understand the type of blood sacrifice that, thank God, the men who were willing to give that blood conducted. Because they made it possible for someone like me to stand here and speak these words today. We would be bending over and kissing the ass of a king or queen. And most of us still are, except it's called government now. Well, let me tell you something. Without those men, these ideas wouldn't have propagated in this land to the extent that they did. We owe them a debt. I know the significance of their actions, of their minds and of their actions, because I've read their philosophy, which most people have never done. Samuel Adams, the chief conspirator of the American Revolution, said, "It is the greatest absurdity to suppose it in the power of one or any number of men to renounce their essential natural rights or the means of preserving those rights," which we're going to talk about a little bit later. If men, through fear, fraud, or mistake, should in terms renounce or give up an essential natural right, the eternal law of reason and the grand end of society would absolutely vacate such renunciation. He is saying here, you don't have a right to give up your rights because that puts everybody else in jeopardy of slavery. You have no right not to understand what a right is. You have a right to not understand how to bake an apple pie, but you don't have a right to not understand what a right is. This is something that is a duty to understand. It transcends a right. You must understand it because the ignorance of its understanding places other beings in jeopardy of slavery. And he's saying if somebody says, I'm the rightful slave of another, the society itself simply vacates that abdication of a right and says, no, you do not have a right to abdicate that. It's not only a right, it's a duty and a responsibility that you can never shirk actually in nature. You can only make the claim that you're going to shirk it, but you can't really do that. Continuing with this quote, he said, the right of freedom being the gift of God Almighty, it is not in the power of man to alienate this gift and voluntarily become a slave. That's why they don't want people reading the Founding Fathers' writings. They might get some crazy ideas that they're free and not owned by others and don't have a right to renounce their freedom. That wild idea might break out and freedom along with it. Yeah, they don't want you reading these man's writings. Certainly not. That's why they're going to pull them from school, and that's why they're going to propagate these Marxists, these neo-Marxists, and these absolutely outright communist ideas that somehow these were evil men. And the people who buy into this psyop don't know their history at all. At all. Contrary to popular disinformation and widely held but erroneous belief, as human beings, we do not possess the right to be apathetic about whatever we want. This notion that I don't care whether we are enslaved is also not a right. You have a right not to care whatever popular celebrity of the day, what fashion they happen to be wearing. Because I certainly don't care about those things. And that's my right not to care about them. I personally don't care about what's happening in popular sports or popular music. Couldn't give a damn, couldn't care less. I don't have the right not to care about the dynamics that govern human freedom. I don't have that right. Why? Because refusing to understand it is putting other beings in jeopardy of slavery. There is no such right not to understand our rights or say, we don't care. I don't care what a right is. I don't care whether society is enslaved. My own grandmother on my father's side of the family looked at me in the face one day and said, I know that we're all enslaved and I don't care. I'm like, you have to be kidding me. I said, how many children do you have? 2. How many grandchildren do you have? 2. How many great-grandchildren do you have? 1. I said, you have 2 children, 2 grandchildren, and a great-grandchild, and you don't care whether the world is enslaved? And you think that's your right not to care? I mean, you have to be kidding me. That the people like this exist within our own families. No one has the right to not care that slavery is continuing and that freedom is being destroyed. This is not a right that exists in nature. Again, you have a right not to care about any frivolous thing that you don't want to care about, but you don't have a right not to care about rights and freedom. It's a duty and a responsibility that you can never shirk in nature. There's also complicity in evil and slavery through silence. Contrary to popular disinformation and widely held but erroneous belief, as human beings, we do not possess the right to remain silent about whatever we want. This is complicity by saying, even if absolute immoral, violent behavior is conducted, and I know it's wrong, I'm going to sit back and do nothing, not even speak about its wrongness. And that's not a right. If I sit back and watch a perpetual condition of duress and slavery take place in my midst, and I don't speak out against it, I am by my non-action partaking in a complicit act with evil. I am condoning by my silence and apathy the evil that's being conducted, and that's not a right. So this is hard for some people to hear, because a lot of people say, well, a wrong can only be an action conducted. No, it's not that simple. You can perform wrong in your thoughts and in your emotions and in your non-actions. Wrongdoings can be performed. So even this crowd needs to explore this dynamic more and understand this dynamic more. And I understand this is going to be controversial even in our circles. We possess the right to be silent about whatever we want only if that silence does not diminish the rights and freedoms of others. In other words, it is not a right to remain silent about the ongoing condition of human slavery. Not a right. By passively accepting evil and remaining silent, we are participating in the evil. Those who through their silence allow evil to be done unchallenged are just as immoral as those who are doing it. And the meme here that I found on the internet says, when freedom is at stake, your silence is not golden, it's yellow. See, that's where we find most of our friends and family members. Some of my friends and family members will say, oh yeah, I recognize this is going on, but I want no part in exposing it. I want no part in talking about it. You know, that's called being a coward. And being a coward is a bad person. Because we are already at war. And I'm not just talking about a spiritual or mental war. We are already at physical war. Physical war is being conducted upon the people of this country and the world. Now here's the actual result, folks. Here's the actual numbers. Think about this number in a war. If the media would be all over it. Over 10,000 Americans alone have now been summarily executed without trial on the streets of America since the massive 9/11 false flag ritual by the standing army invasion force known as the American police. And I put the word American in double quotes because they are nothing of the kind. They are trash, un-American, order-following vermin. And I'll say it to their face. 10,000 lives gone with no trial. That's called public executions. Yet we don't call it that. We euphemize it. And people who are complicit with this behavior condone it. That's who lives among us. Dirty, rotten Tories who would have supported the British Crown and their henchmen during the American Revolutionary era period. They're no different than those Tories. This is the standing army invasion force that the founding fathers warned us about. A standing army was repeatedly told to the public by the founding fathers and American revolutionaries that if you let a standing army rise up in your midst all around you, you will have tyranny. And that's exactly what we allowed to happen. And this is who they are. This is a foreign invasion standing army force. That's the standing army the founding fathers warned us about in all of their writings. And they said, that's the force that you're going to have to prevent from rising up in this country, and you're going to have to do it by maintaining a well-regulated militia, which I've talked about ad infinitum on my podcast series and in my Second Amendment presentation, which everybody should fully understand, especially in these times when it's coming under attack again because of these nonsense false flag ritual killing events. Samuel Adams, once again, I'm going to have a lot of quotes from the founding fathers in this presentation. He said, if you love wealth, he said this in Philadelphia, if you love wealth greater than liberty, the tranquility of servitude greater than the animating contest for freedom, go home from us in peace. We seek not your counsel nor your arms. Crouch down and lick the hand that feeds you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you are our countrymen. You know, I say this before every one of my band shows. That's the intro to our performance. I restate Samuel Adams' words before we start to play. Let's go into the next section, dissidence. This word means to be an opponent of the established political order of the time, so-called order. I'd say to be an opponent of the established chaos of the day. So what's a dissident? Well, what's a true dissident? A true dissident is somebody who opposes the established political condition of slavery, regardless of how dangerous it is for their physical safety, because they understand that slavery is always immoral and illegitimate, and they correctly value creation's gift of free will above all else. I say to people a lot, a true relationship between individuals is always a three-dimensional relationship, meaning that there has to be a connection between all individuals involved in the relationship and truth itself. Anything else is a disconnected, flat, two-dimensional, so-called relationship. That's why a true relationship that we have, the other person is always connected with the values of truth and the principles of natural law, if it's a true relationship. I mean, you know, the American revolutionaries are no better, there's no better example anywhere of a true dissident that valued their people and their country that they were living upon and stood against tyranny. And then you have someone like an individual, you know, like the person who stood in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square before the Tiananmen Square massacre. I mean, you want to talk about balls. I mean, you want to talk about courage. There's somebody to look up to. You'll have this argument all the time. Well, what are we going to do? Stand up to tanks? Yeah! We're going to stand up to tanks if that's what it takes. Yeah! I'll stand up to a tank if that's what it takes to protect freedom and truth. Yeah! Absolutely. Think I'm worried about what these psychopaths have? I'll force your hand to drop hydrogen bombs on the world. I'm not backing down. I don't care how many people you kill or threaten. You want to know why? I know who we're really up against. I know definitively, not by a belief, not by reading about it in a book, not by being told by anybody else. I was in the room with these psychopaths who run the world. And if you were there too, you'd fight as hard as me or harder. There would be no excuses about, I have this, or that to do. This is what you'd be doing. Everybody. That's why people ask me, what do you want to be able to do, Mark? Do you want any special power? Would you like to have any kind of a special ability or power? Yeah, I say the same thing all the time to every room I speak in front of. I want to have the ability to, against natural law, kidnap an individual and bring them someplace that I want to bring them without their consent. Now, how strange does that sound for me to say? But that's what I want the ability to do. And without consequence. I would like to have the supernatural ability to kidnap another human being against their will without consequence, because you know where I would take them? I would take them to a satanic ritual house dungeon, and I'd dump them in the basement, and the Satanists would have their way with them, and the police would be guarding the ritual chamber, and then no action would ever be taken against the Satanists performing the rape or murder or violence that would be conducted, and then they would know definitively what the world is. Definitively, they would know. They wouldn't have a belief about it. They would know. That's why I want that power. You know, I would also take the ability to convey everything that I know with a touch. That would be a nice second power. That would be a nice one. Okay? Yeah. Let's look at some historical examples of dissidents throughout time in chronological order. We're going to look at Jesus, Now, let me make a caveat here. I say this all the time whenever I bring up Jesus as any kind of example in any of my work, okay? One, I'm not propagating any religion, not propagating Christianity, okay? I'm not in any way putting this up on a pedestal. I'm talking about this in an allegorical sense, or if you want to prefer to look at Jesus as a historical figure, whether he was or not, we're talking about the story as portrayed in the New Testament and the actions and the